guys, so this is Lizzie with the Love From Lizi December 2017 10 cards 1 kit video. I'm just going to start off, as I often do, showing you how I split my cardstock. There's 5 sheets that comes in the kit and they are American letter size, so I've split them all lengthways, halfway, which is at 4¼ inches, and then I just fold them all from the top to bottom and use my bone folder to get a nice firm crisp fold on them. Okay, so into card 1, and I've used my big Xyron machine here to put some adhesive onto the back of the vellum. I do find that the Xyron machine doesn't leave any trace behind, so it's ideal for this. I then did use my bone folder to give it a good firm sort of run over. I did cut that out in editing because I tried to make this as quick as possible. And here you'll see I used my scissors to pierce a hole in the middle and then cut my way around the inside of that silver foiling on the vellum. I have folded one of the specialty cardstocks, like a wave pearlescent card, to make a card base, so it's separate from the 10 that you saw me make originally, and I've just stuck the vellum on the front. And here I've selected one of the stickers that comes in the kit, and I've used my anti-static powder tool to neutralise it, and then put some foam squares on the back. Now, being a lefty, you'll see me doing this a few times here, but I start from the far right and then work backwards, just so that I don't put my hand into anything like glossy accents. So yeah, as I say, you'll see that quite often throughout. It's intentional, although it looks like madness. I have taken the adhesive paper from the back of the foam squares just to stick that down, and I've put it quite low in the middle of that square, just so that I could fit this leaf trim on top. I'll put my teeth back in and try and speak properly now. Okay, and then I've run one of the narrowest peel-offs along the seam at the top and at the bottom of the card, just to give it a finishing touch. All the while being very cautious of the fact that along the glossy accents is wet. Usually I would recommend doing this at the end, but as with all of my cards, I don't really plan what they're going to look like beforehand, so I sort of build them as I go, and I think I had thought I'd finished when I put the glossy accents on the there, but I carried on building. So this is my first card from this kit. I'm just trimming off the edges there of the peel-offs, and there we go. So it's very simple. The cards that I've made this month are very simple, so hopefully they're quite nice and straightforward to replicate if you'd like to. Do let me know which is your favourite, because some of them are actually quite different to my usual style. I did actually find this kit quite challenging to work with, because I'm not usually one for doing much with detailed flowers. I like quite clean and simple stamps usually, so this was a bit different. But anyway, I'm digressing. So I neutralised with my anti-static powder tool, and I heat embossed a rose at the top and at the centre, and heat embossed using some Tonic Nouveau Crimson Gloss embossing powder. And then I held a frame around the rose to see positioning, and to make sure that I didn't Versamark stamp any within that frame, so that it made the red rose stand out a little bit more. I used the Versamark obviously to get a nice watermark, and then I used glossy accents to stick the frame down, and here you see me just going around the frame with the glossy accents. I did put 2 coats on just to make sure that it did have a really nice shiny finish to it, which I'm hoping you'll be able to pick up from the photo at the end. I do put a still shot of each of the cards that I've made so that you can pause it if you want to have a better look. And here you'll see me just spelling out hello using the letters, the sticker letters from the kit. I do this on a bone folder. You can do this on a ruler or anything. It's just that I find that way I've got a better chance of actually getting them straight. So that was the end of card 2. Here's card 3, and I've got the Xyron machine out again. Now, the vellum pieces in this kit are actually quite large, which is different to other ones that I've had previously, and I do actually quite like the large ones because they almost do the whole card front, so I was able to scrimp and save on my patterned papers. So anyway, I've put that through the machine. I'm using my bone folder just to give it a really good push down, and here you'll see I'm using my craft knife, and you've got my big head in the way, sorry, but I'm cutting just along the inside of the silver foiling detail on the vellum. And I would have done this with scissors, but I wanted to preserve the wheel because I wanted to use that as well. And this is how I've removed the backing. I laid the sticker down on the craft mat and then pulled the backing away because I didn't want it to tear. It was obviously very narrow at the top and the bottom of that circle that had been cut. And then I stuck that directly onto one of the card bases. It is ever so slightly larger, so I've just put it in the centre and then trimmed off the extra. And then I've cut the back off of that card base because, to be honest, I wanted to use that paler colour to make the vellum sort of stand up, if you like, the printing on the vellum. And then I'm going to use a different coloured base altogether to put that on. So this is just a way of me stretching my cardstock, if you like. And then I've laid the outer pieces with the roses on my card front where I will position it. And then I've taken the backing off of the wagon wheel and I just place it back into the circle. Trying to match it all up again was interesting. So make sure you keep it the right way up if you're going to copy this card. I've taken a piece of acetate from my stash and just cut it to size. And then using some foam tape, I've folded it in half on itself so that it's a double thickness because I'm going to make this a shaker card and I want there to be enough room for the sequins to move around. I then cut the width of the tape into 3 so that I know that it would be narrow enough to fit around the top and the bottom of that open circle. And then I just used the little leftover bits to support the rest of the card front. Popped some sequins onto the wagon wheel and I took out the colours that I thought might clash with the colours that were printed onto the vellum. And then I stuck on the front, if you like, the acetate piece. Using the waist circle from the card front that I cut apart, I stamped a sentiment using the piece that had been cut away so that it would sit perfectly within, on the acetate within the circle. And that's my card done. So here's card 4. And here I'm using, it's sort of like a little wheelbarrow or cart, old-fashioned wooden cart. And I'm just using some Distress Oxide in walnut stain here, just to stamp it. And I did stamp it twice just to make sure that I got a really nice dark crisp image. And I'm stamping this onto the remaining half of the card base. By using some of the embossed card, it did free up a card base. So I'm using the lightest colour. And here you'll see me, I'm just using my blending tool just to shade ever so slightly the actual wagon so that it stands up a little bit from the card. And then I'm just taking a little strip of patterns paper and deciding where to place it, and that's ever so slightly off to the side. I use double-sided tape because if I had to choose between tape and glue, I think I do prefer tape just because it's an immediate stick. And thankfully I seem to manage to get things straight. Not always, but often it works out. And I'm more likely to knock it with wet glue and then be in trouble because it will dry crooked. So I've stuck that down using the lines on my grid mat to make sure it was straight and then just trimmed off the ends. Here I'm just running a peel off along either edge. I'm a peel off addict. I think they just finish an edge off, just make it look a little bit cleaner. Trim away, and then all the pieces that I cut off I often keep because they would be great for something else. And here I'm just arranging the roses into sort of like a bouquet, if you like. I did use all of them. I did actually make an effort to try to use as many products and as much of the products as possible with this this time around, because so often I have so many leftovers and I don't actually ever get back to using these kits again. So I thought I would really go to town. So I used all my roses, whereas normally I might have only used a couple. And then using some wire cutters, I'm just trimming off the edge. I laid some double-sided sellotape on top of the stems and then put another piece on the back just for support to hold them in place. And I remove the tape from one side and then I lay the cart over the top of that tape. And then using some foam squares, I mount up my little barrow. I did have to snip some of my foam squares. I don't have any thin, skinny ones. I need to look into getting some. And then after having removed all the backing, I pop that at the bottom of the card. And then using some more scraps, because I don't throw anything away, and again using that walnut stain to tie in, I chose the sentiment, that I wanted to go with, which is You Are So Loved. And then just using my scissors, I snip out the sentiment into a very simple square, and then foam mount that up on top of the card at the bottom under the handle there. So this is a very simple card, but I think it's quite cute. As I say, these aren't my normal style of cards, and so it was quite challenging. And I've had, you know how sometimes you can't craft? Well, I've had that of recent. It's just not come naturally, so that's why this video is going up a little bit later than usual. Okay, so anyway, on to card 5, and I'm using some Tim Holtz stitched rectangle dies here, and I just choose 2 of them and centre them onto one of the pieces of specialty card. This is the darker of the 2 greys, and then using some washi tape to make sure they don't budge when they're in my my big shot. I neutralise the tape on my hands first because it's always the way that I end up tearing my cardstock, which is very upsetting. And then I pop off the frame that I want, and I've chosen the dark green base, and I'm going to do another shaker card now. So I use my glossy accents just to pop around. Now, to be fair, you can use any adhesive. Glossy accents is kind of my go-to because I like the little dispenser bottle that I've put it in. It makes it nice and easy, and it does give a really good firm hold. And so here I'm using the tulle, and I just lay it in and then I cut it, rather than cutting it and then trying to make sure that it's got enough space for the adhesive. So there we go, and I just give it a little press down into the glossy accents, and then I'm doing, as I did with the last shaker card, folding the foam tape back on itself to create a double thickness, and this time I just split it in half because there's obviously a wider edge for me to go around. And then removing the backing from one side, I stick that down and I make sure there's no gaps. I then get a sticker, which the sentiments on these stickers are lovely. They're really, really cute. And this one is Live Every Day with Purpose. And then I stick it onto that one of the middle pieces, the waste pieces from my die cutting, and then fussy cut around the edges just to give it another border and match it into that frame. I pop some double-sided adhesive onto the back of the sticker panel, if you like, and then to make sure that the sequins don't all stick in it, I lay another piece of double-sided tape on top of that to make sure that it's no sticky. Use my anti-static powder tool just to run around the inside to make sure that there's no stick for the sequins to get caught in. And then I dump a load of sequins on the front of the card, put off the release paper and stick it down. And here you just see I've put a few of the smaller sequins on the top left corner and the bottom right, and then I pop a couple also onto that little sticker in the middle. So a very simple card, but quite effective. And that is the end of that one. So moving on now. This is, there's various ways that I do this. It depends on the weather, I suppose, as to how I go about it. But if I'm covering a card front, I sometimes do this method. And I think there is actually one later on in the video that I use the other method that I like to use. But my T-square ruler and my pencil, and then just cut it out with scissors is a favourite to go to. And then I pop some double-sided sellotape onto the back, and then I peel off opposing corners and fold it down. This way I'm given more sort of control over where it sticks, because then you only have those 2 little areas that are going to touch and get caught. And then you can just pull the release paper out. Then I trim around the edge because I always do it a little bit larger to make sure I've got a bit of wiggle room. And then I've cut some of the striped paper, pop some double-sided tape onto the back of it, and position that right in the centre of my card front. And then as ever, turn it over and cut off from the back. And here I've chosen a sticker which says "Be Your Own Kind of Beautiful," and I wanted to have it popped up. So I've neutralised it with my anti-static powder tool, and then popped some foam squares onto the back, and then put it just above centre on the card front, and then taken one of the little silver bows that comes in the kit and using my glossy accents to have a titty bit of glue just at the bottom of the roses there, and then I hold the bow in it. I do hold the bow in it for a few seconds, and then I also put an acrylic block on top, here you can see. And then using the Nuvo drops, which match this polka dot pattern paper really nicely, I just put a little spray from the top left to bottom right. And that's card 6 done. Now on to card 7. Now I think this may be my favourite, and this is really not my usual kind of style, and there is no stamping on it whatsoever, so it's different. But here I've chosen one of the patterned papers, and it has sort of these little cranberries or whatever kind of berries they are, and I just take a section. And I do this all by eye, I'm afraid. There's no measurements that I can offer. And I've cut my panel out. I've popped some double-sided tape on the back. And then I just position that towards the bottom. And I do use the lines on my grid mat to make sure that it's straight. Pull the release papers out to make sure that it's down nicely. And then trim off the little bit of overhang. And then here I've chosen one of the silver doilies. I'm just using my glossy accents here to dab around in the centre and around the edges. And then I sort of place it off the side to the left, again giving that a nice little press to make sure that it sticks, and then from the reverse trimming away the extra. And then this ribbon is one of my favourites. It's gorgeous. It's sparkly, and it's canvas, so there's a lot of texture on this card. And so using my fingers just to sort of straighten the wire out, I then lay down some double-sided sellotape on the back of the ribbon. I use 2 different widths just because I didn't have one that was wide enough for the whole thing. And then I use all of my berries. Now these berries I cut down so that there's not going to be an overhang of wire. And I use wire cutters for this, but I do believe if you've got an old pair of scissors that you don't really like, that scissors will cut these as well. So don't be afraid if you don't have any wire cutters. And then I take the ribbon, the backing, sorry, off of the back of the ribbon. And here I'm sort of lining up the ribbon at the same sort of height as the card, because I'm just going to space these out. And then using my grid mat, I leave about 1 centimetre or so of stems showing, and then I just spread them out. I could have measured it to make sure that they were all even, but it's a little more organic this way. I pop another layer of double-sided tape on top, again just to sandwich those stems in, and then remove both the backing pieces, and then lay this onto the doily and the card front, and then again give it a nice firm press down and trim off the overhang of the ribbon. You could fold this in. I did show in my last month's kit there was a wire ribbon, and I fed it inside the card and then finished it nicely inside, so this is an alternative. And here I am neutralising another sticker, and then popping a foam square, 2 foam squares onto the back. And then I've got one of the little glitter tags. So again, this card's got lots going on. It's got glitter, it's got silver foil, it's got the glossy berries. So there's plenty going on. And then I use foam tape again just to pop the tag up. And then just lay that down onto the ribbon. Now usually with red I like to pair gold, so this is quite different to what I would usually make. So, but yeah, I think that's probably my favourite one. And now here, I've never really showcased the Chameleon pens properly, so I thought I would make a bit of an effort with this one. And the rose lent itself beautifully for this. I apologise for not having been a bit more zoomed in, because that would have been probably quite helpful. But I did the whole rose with the 1 pen that came with the kits. It was the reason behind picking that colour. And all I do is I sort of charge the pen with the colourless blender chamber, and then I work petal by petal, and where I believe the sun would hit, or light would hit, is where I started colouring, and where would be the darkest was where I finished colouring. Now there is kind of a knack, and I think in time I could actually be quite good with this, but considering this was like a first proper attempt at using this pen, I'm really happy with how it came out. I'm sure there are some colourists that are cringing as they watch this and say, no, you shouldn't do it like that, it needs to be like this. But I'm quite happy with it. And it's when there was an instance where if I used the lightest part and I dragged it all the way across to the one side of the petal and then back, by the time I dragged it back it was dark again. So all I would do is charge the pen in the chamber again and sort of work over the top until there was a nice bleed on it. So this the cardstock that I'm colouring on also it's not alcohol marker pen friendly, but it didn't bleed, so I take that as a good omen. It's not specifically alcohol marker friendly, I should say, rather than it's not. It's just this is the vanilla cardstock that I carry. So I just work my way around the rows, filling in, and as you can see, sometimes I hold it on the chamber for longer. The larger the piece, the larger the petal, sorry, the longer I charge it for. So, and then just for the little bits and pieces, I want those really dark, I just sort of dab the pen around, and yes, so that's my rose. And this is sped to 3 times normal rate. I think it took about 4 minutes to colour. And then I fussy cut it out, and then using my other vanilla card base, I use the narrower of the 2 ribbons, and I just sort of wrap it around in a bit of a mess really. Again, just another way to use ribbon. And then I cut some double-sided sellotape into very thin strips, and on the inside of the card I stuck down one end, and then I laid double-sided sellotape over the top of that end, peeled it back, and then laid the ribbon directly into it so that it was almost seamless. And then once it was stuck down, I trimmed it off, because if you trim it before you stick it, you can get the tape in the wrong place and it can be a bit of a nuisance. Then on the front I did use a little bit of double-sided tape under that little messy nest at the bottom. And then I stamped in black ink. If you can be anything, be kind. I did use Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink to stamp my rose and my sentiment, so they matched. Popped some foam squares on the back of the rose, and then just added a nice little spray of sequins just as a little bit of interest. So this is ever such a simple card, but I wanted the rose to be the focal point, and I think it worked out. But this is how I often do sequins. I sort of, using my glue, blob around. I do like going from one corner to another in sort of a messy fashion. I do try to adhere to the rule of 3, or at least uneven numbers, odd numbers. And then I just sort of picked out sequins. There was no rhyme or reason. I didn't use, the only colour I didn't use, sorry, was green, but it wasn't intentional. So, and that's the end of that card. So here's card 9. This, again, this is quite different from my usual style. So I've held a doily over the vellum piece, and then using a pencil I've marked where it goes, and then I cut around the inside of the silver foiling, and then I've sort of poked the doily through, and then using a pencil I've just drawn loosely around the outside edge. Using some washi tape to keep it still, I cut along my pencil line, because this pencil line means that the doily will be hidden behind the silver foil frame. And then I lift up the vellum, put some double-sided sellotape on the back of the doily, and then this will hold the doily in place for me. After I remove the backing, push it down, and now my doily is stuck in place and it's peeping through the vellum. And then I ummed and ahed about how to lay this out, and I decided to go on the triangle, which isn't usually, again, my style. And here I'm just using some Nouveau glue just to stick down that flap so that it didn't come up whilst I was, once I'd sent it. And here I'm using a scrap of that dark grey pearlescent cardstock, and I cut the rose with the die. And now this is on the reverse side. I'm just putting some double-sided sellotape on the back of the doily, again so that it won't be seen from the front. Removing the release paper. And then using the lines on my grid mat, again just to make sure that I'm all straight, I position that down. And the thing is, some people would probably find it quite irksome that the vellum wasn't stuck down all the way around, but I actually quite like that there's a bit of movement to the front, and I do apologise for my head here. But I picked up the scroll stamp, and using the Versamark ink just to make a watermark, I stamped, and using the lines on my acrylic block, it made sure that they were even all the way around. And now here I'm just using some glossy accents to put some adhesive on the back of my little rose die, which I stick on top of the doily and the vellum. And then I choose a sentiment, which is always in my heart, and I heat emboss that using liquid platinum Ranger embossing powder. And then I cut that into a little fishtail, and using some foam squares mount that up to the bottom right hand corner. So it's a very simple card and quite muted in colour, but again, you know, I'm quite happy with it. Okay, so here's card 10, the final card. And it was at this point that I realised I hadn't used my my own embossing powder. I'd used 3 other kinds, but not mine, so I thought I'd do a card using that. So this is the other way that I cover the front of a card front in pattern paper. I put double-sided tape onto the card base directly, peel back the corners, and then lay the pattern paper on top. Once one corner is straight, the rest will be straight, as long as your card base is folded properly. So then pull out the release tabs, and then give it a nice press, and then using my scissors, use the edge of the card base as a guide as to where to cut. Okay, so now here, this is me using the Fluffy Snow embossing powder. I use my Versamark pen to draw sort of a panel that matches the inside, and you can see it there. I did heat it up, and here I'm stamping "You Are So Loved," and I stamped that in VersaFine. And so then I've used clear embossing powder over the top just to make sure that it doesn't bleed or run. And then sticking this sticker directly onto the puffy snow, I then pop some foam squares onto the back, and I use the back of the sticker space, and I also use where the silver frame is to hide my foam squares. And I do put quite a few on there because I don't want it sagging. And then I pop that, after taking away all the release, onto, again, centre slightly towards the top of my card base. And I've left a boo-boo in this just to prove that it does happen to everyone. I'll tell you when we get there. But yes, so I centre this and then position it slightly higher, and then using my Nouveau drops, I just do 3 little dots at the bottom. And at this point I decided I wanted to put some glossy accents around that blue frame, because I wanted to tie the blue from the Nouveau drops in, and there I put my hand straight into the Nouveau drops. So like a pro, I carried on doing the glossy accents, and then I used a scrap of card to sort of scrape up that little bottom mess that I'd made, and then I re-stamped it. So here are the leftovers. So there's lots of stickers, there's the Doily, there's the stamp set, obviously peel-offs. I've still got 2 sheets of the specialty embossed. I've got 5 full sheets of 6x6, and I didn't use a complete sheet. Then there is still 4 pieces of vellum, there's specialty cardstock. I have a doily, I've still got a calendar and some ribbon. I've got the die. So as you can see, there's lots of bits and pieces there. Additional products that I used. So we've got the Xyron machine, we've got acetate, we've got various sort of usual tools. I've got the Versa pen, I've got the embossing powders that I used on top, my stamp chamois tape, foam squares, inks, and then the Tim Holtz stitched rectangle dies, guillotine, and acrylic blocks. So nothing too extraordinary. And now here are the still shots of the cards. I really hope you've liked this video. The design team are all working away at getting theirs all done. Please do leave a comment with which of the cards was your favourite. I'm always interested to know, to make sure that next time if there's a specific style that people like to see, I can make sure that I try to incorporate it. I hope you're all very happy and well, and you all enjoyed your Thanksgivings. The mystery boxes are winging their way out, and the website is in a very good position now, thankfully. It's just got some more little bits and pieces that I'm looking forward to releasing. Anyway, until next time, thanks very much. Bye!